Welcome to the PPSS Success Show. My name is Fong, and today we have another great guest. He comes highly recommended by a lot of people out there because he's able to understand why strategy, even though if it was the best plan, even though if it's clear, data-driven, sometimes it's still doomed to fail to drive results. He is a four times Chief Human Resources Officer, both in private and also public experiences. He is the founder of Talent Sherpa, where he's been able to advise lots of CEOs all around the world and also private equity leaders from turning plans into business value, contributing to over $128 million worth of measurable results. He's able to move talent from just being supportive functions to a direct performance lever and also getting teams more aligned so that they're more accountable for their actions and execution. So please welcome Executive Leadership Advisor, Talent Sherpa, and also podcast host, Mr. Jackson Lynch.
So great to be here with you and all your listeners and viewers.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. Always enjoy speaking with people like yourself who's been able to really help others become more and more successful and also more companies and also teams become more aligned as well. Now, how did you become who you are? Like, is this something that you got out of school and go, you know what, this is what I wanted to be. I want to be the talent Sherpa.
Yeah, not at all. In fact, I started as a engineer for the Boeing company. I worked my way through high school and college as a radio disc jockey, and so there is a little bit of a full circle coming around and doing podcasts again.
This jockey, engineer.
That's right.
Where does that cross
ABFT.
path?
Look, I'm a Renaissance man. What can I tell you? I also like Broadway musicals and Seattle sports. So I can do a little bit of everything. But no, I didn't go out of my way to become a talent Sherpa. What I realized, however, from that engineering and financial background is after a set of really successful opportunities inside human capital, inside organizations, like I wanted to help people figure out ways to do this thing better. And for me, it's a matter of looking at it at human capital the same way we have always looked at manufacturing and sales and the like. And that is, it's all about the architecture. It's not about the individual. W. Edwards Deming said it, years and decades ago that if you look at a people problem, it is 94% the system and 6% the people. And yet, most folks are going after the individual without the architecture, and I'm on a spirited path to try to help change that.
Awesome. So, okay, if you could repeat that again, you said 94% is the system and 6% is the people.
Yes, that's what Deming said.
So then, so when knowing that, what do you do when you go in? Like, do you work with the system with more effort, or do you kind of work with the people as well?
Well, you have to work with people. They're actively involved in it. But we have to start anytime you're designing any sort of system, where do you start? You start with what am I trying to build this for? And so in the world of people, that is around mandate clarity. Have I defined clearly what success looks like? Have I talked about the trade-offs that I'm willing to make? Have I designed the sandbox within which people are able to play? Have I been clear about decision rights and who gets to make what decision, where they need to check in and the like? And so any sort of system that you build around an outcome, it's got to start with what are you building it for and that degree of clarity. And candidly, most people don't take that effort. Why? I have a couple of theories. One of them is we just get focused in on activities so much because there's a dopamine hit. And and so we don't really think more broadly about something in the future and how we design it. And let me use a really easy example. I think most entrepreneurs watching your show they're comfortable and familiar with the concept of accounts receivable. And so if I were to go to the accounts receivable clerk and say, your job is to collect cash. Well, that's an activity. It's not an outcome. And it's really hard for me to figure out how I hire someone, what feedback I can provide someone, how I decide whether they're worthy of increased scope and role, because I've defined their winning as doing a task. As an alternative, you can have that same role and you can define it around the outcome. And that outcome might be to shrink the cash collection cycle, which provides all sorts of working capital benefits from it. Well, now, if I'm hiring someone to to reduce the cash conversion cycle versus do a task, I have way more tools in my tool belt to be able to figure out whether this person is good at what they're what I need them to be good at. I can give them better feedback. Oh, by the way, they also have more agency. So step one is you've got to define what winning looks like, where the sandbox lines are, and what decision rights that individual person has. And then you're looking at the broader system and you say, what has to be true for this outcome to be reliably consistent? Most of us will look in the backwards view, in the rear view mirror, and say, who is accountable for that? But that's usually backwards looking and it's often blame oriented. This is forward looking, what has to be true, and then you design around that. And then the third thing you can do is you can say, I want to red team this, which is an old military exercise back in the 50s in the Cold War. It's used a lot in technology today, and that is let's assume that it failed. What, why did it fail? What caused it to fail? And then I can work through the process of making sure that I have contingency plans if I can, or I fix it if I can't. All of that work is harder. It takes more effort. It takes a little bit more time. And it is not as easy as saying Jimmy's the problem. But in reality, that's how you fix performance problems, not by blaming poor Jimmy.
I see. So when it comes to that, like, you also have to communicate that to the team and the leadership team, and also get buy-in from basically everybody in order to implement the system. How often do you get pushback from companies or executives and whatnot, where they go, you know what, I've been doing this for this long and we kind of like it. Yeah, the results aren't where we want it to be, but how do we know, or why should we do all these changes just for sake of change?
Yeah, the so how frequently do we get pushback that change is hard? Only when I talk to people. Uh, so it is part of our DNA that we enjoy what we know. Change management is never about where I'm headed. It's about giving up where I've been. And so again, the focusing on outcomes and that clarity up front become really, really important because as part of that, you've defined what winning looks like.
Yeah.
And if winning is being achieved consistently and reliably, then you don't need to be doing any changes. However, if that's not true, then by focusing on the outcomes, then that allows you to have a much more robust conversation with whoever might be kind of moving with inertia from where they are today versus where they need to go. Because you can just point back to the scorecard and say, are we winning or are we losing? We've defined what winning looks like. The other thing is, I don't think we need buy-in from everybody. That's a challenge. We need to be much more clear upfront on decision rights and get rid of the pocket veto. At some point, there are people that get to make decisions in organizations. You need to be very clear on who those are. There are some that get informed. There are some that get consulted. There are some that have single throat to choke accountability for things. You need to figure out what role people have and make sure that you do it. A great example of where that doesn't work is in interviewing. I might have 10 people interview and everyone has a vote. No. The only person that should have a vote is the hiring manager, and everyone else has input to help that person make a better decision. And yet we need to be more capitalistic and less communistic when it comes to how we think about these things.
Uh, no, you have a vast amount of experience in both private and public. What would be the biggest difference between the two when it comes to aligning teams and getting the systems implemented?
Yeah, the I think the biggest difference is the time horizon. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of people in public companies, when they move down into a private organization, they struggle. And there are really two reasons for it. One is private equity tends to be, by and large, less lower infrastructure. And that requires a lot more dirty hands. It requires a lot more grit. It requires a lot more figured out. And candidly, it requires more clarity because you have the ability to shuck and jive and get to where you need to go faster. I think the second big difference between the two, again, is the time horizon, where a public company, you have like this forward-looking view of how long until I see results. And while we live quarter to quarter, especially in the human capital space, the expectation is that there is a return into the future. In private equity, there's a hold period. And everything we need to do inside of a business has to provide positive ROI inside that hold period, which unfortunately for a lot of HR folks and finance folks and others, it takes out a lot of the things that we are comfortable and programmatically, used to putting in place. But if I'm working on something and it's not going to get uh, paid for by the other side of that transaction, I shouldn't be doing it. And it's interesting because I think especially in things like technology infrastructure that you need to put in, or a lot of times in human capital, we want to build what we know from our larger organizations, and that's just a mistake. You have to figure out what the business needs now and what the return horizon is, and it's got to be matched up from a timeline relative to when you expect to exit and whether or not the new buyer is going to pay for it.
So you have a lot of successes, and I would just love to hear what is one of the best success stories that you ever had, and one that you're most proud of. And then also in contrast, I always love hearing those failing stories as well because those are the ones that lots of people learn a lot from. So is there one that you're very, very proud of, and then one that did not go according to plan, but you found a way to rectify and make it work for you?
Yeah, let's start with a good one. So I was leading an organization. We were doing a lot of smaller M&A roll-ups in a distributor network. And we had the opportunity in the middle of that to buy a large company and then reverse integrate both of those into a mothership, if you will. The work that my team needed to focus in on was to deliver a substantial amount of synergies. It was tied to having fewer people paying those that remain less and kind of rebuilding everything as a part of the people infrastructure. We got really focused in on clarity of outcomes. We got focused in on what those signature strengths for the organization needed to be. And we built a ton of messaging around that. We also leaned in heavily to be aggressively direct in our communication. In fact, we would think around in meetings about things we hoped we would not be asked in a town hall. We'd write them down and then we'd answer them proactively. So as a result of that, what happened? We did have a lot of synergies that we pulled out. We over delivered those synergies. We delivered them early, but here's what was different. We also had the highest organizational health of any division inside of this multinational company that you would clearly recognize. So, and we did that by bringing people with us, and it was just a really fun exercise. And by the way, on that team, about 1 out of 5 people that I'd hired into that role are sitting CHROs today, and
Wow.
so it was a really wonderful incubator for that as well. Now, what might we need to do differently? I have news for you. Life is not what you see on Instagram. And so everyone stubs their toe. I wish we would think about that a little bit differently. My first CHRO job is probably the one that I struggled with the most because I thought I was continuing to operate inside a PepsiCo environment where building alignment had to do with it's a good idea, it's profit accretive, and someone wants us to go do it. I need to align around execution. So I show up in this organization that wasn't as sophisticated, and it was older and had, I think, a little bit less pace to it. And I started. It was a good idea. It was profit accretive. The CEO wanted us to do it, and so I started on execution. And I found myself rejected like a bad organ. And it was really frustrating because I just didn't understand that alignment outside of PepsiCo, where I'd spent a decade, was different from what it was in the real world. So what did I learn from that? Well, I learned that it is really important to focus in on mandates, and that's one of the reasons why today I spend so much time with my coaching clients in CHRO, brand new seats, to align that mandate with the CEO, with the board, so that everyone knows what winning looks like. They know where the sandbox lines are. They understand where their decision rights are, and ultimately we have the ability to execute within that. And so, what was probably the biggest career toe stub of my life turned into the basis for a building, so I can help others avoid just that.
That's awesome. And I love how you say that because lots of people are so afraid of failure that they don't even start trying anything, and therefore they remain stagnant. So it's those failures that if you are able to learn from it, you could actually excel more, and then take those lessons and help others grow and succeed as well.
Absolutely. And think about the world that we're in right now with artificial intelligence and all the doomsayers. In a world of possible right answers, the only wrong one is staying exactly where you are and turtling up.
Yeah.
And we've got to figure out a way to lean into that discomfort because you are either winning or you're learning. Those are your only two options.
Hmm.
You don't do either of them if you're staying still.
Well, it's very fitting that you mentioned AI because that was going to be my next question. So, with the AI being so talked about right now, how are you taking that into your industry and how are you making it more impactful?
Yeah, I'm on a little bit of a crusade to help people think about how to treat this differently from what most companies have done historically. Every time we've had a technology, we have built it on top of whatever the foundation is. And so it's kind of like if you you know, are doing archaeology, you see levels and levels and levels of prior structure that just things get built on top of. This is different. This is the only one that allows us, and in fact, I think requires us to rethink about the work. And the right answer to that is to first off look at your entire process. What are you trying to do? Should you even be doing it?
Uh,
And if you are, what is the outcome need to look like, and what are the steps that we have traditionally followed? Then assign a value to each of those steps. And if they are lower value, repetitive, tight rules, figure out an agentic solution to apply to that, and you're going to be in good shape. You want to have humans in or above the loop. Everyone talks about in. I think actually above the loop is where we're headed because there will be agents that are managing other agents. And so as you kind of rethink that work design, you can come up with a brand new way of doing business. You can shred the things that don't need to be a part of it that we never have taken the time to shred before. And we can then apply a labor model of what needs to be human, what needs to be agentic, and ultimately, what do I need a gig worker to go do? Because you don't need a full-time employee for every solution. You need to if you have a high variability of demand for that thing, then you should apply a staffing plan associated with that. And historically, we've told organizations don't do that because we rapidly cut their budget and to keep them from having the money associated with having a gig worker. And as a result of that, people learn and they start applying. I am going to only have full-time employees for everything. And those people that don't change that mindset, I think, are going to be the ones that really struggle in the future on
mm.
how to apply and fully leverage, fully use this technology.
I think you're absolutely right. People need to have a different mindset when it comes to especially AI. But any other new technology coming in, or maybe somebody else coming in and hey, let's implement the system and whatnot. You need to have an open mindset. So, what is your key to people developing an open mindset? Because I think that is a big thing in the industry you're in. You're going into different companies and leadership groups can go, hey, try this or do this or implement this. They too also need to have a good open mindset. So, what is the key to having a mental mindset that's open?
Yeah, I think there are two. One is you need to just be genuinely curious about how things work. That curiosity will always serve you well because it allows you to be thoughtful about the why, not just the what. And the thing that AI is going to be able to help us with. I'm not the doomer. I think this is actually going to be pretty awesome. I do. It does scare me a little bit in terms of some of the decisions that are being made in a non-transparent way, but as it applies to business, I think we're going to be, we need to lean into that curiosity and figure out the why, because that is how work will be redesigned in the future.
Mhm.
The other thing, I've done this for years. I don't like hiring for experience, because experience only helps me figure out whether they can solve today's problems and probably just yesterday's problems. So I lean into trying to hire people that have high degrees of applied learning. And can they take something today and figure it out? So one of the things when I was growing up in human capital, one of my favorite questions on campus would be, "What do you do for fun?" And then they would tell me, and then I'd say, "Well, how does this make you a better X?" So, for example, I had a candidate. Her name was Amy. She was a mechanical engineer, and I said, what do you do for fun?" And she says, I compose music. I said, "Great. How does that make you a better mechanical engineer?" And then she went into the entire conversation about the transitions, about the handoffs, about the understructure and the tempo, and how you build and crescend and diminish. And she took this wonderful thing about music and she applied it to something unrelated to music in a way that I've never seen done before. So I offer a job on the spot. Why?
Wow.
Because it doesn't matter what she's going to see. She has already proven the ability to connect to disparate things. That's going to be of increasing importance as we look into the future.
That is awesome. And I love that example because there's so many people out there who goes, hey, this is so unrelated. Why do we even care, right? But
Yeah.
then the way you put it, there is lots of different idiosyncrasies when it comes to how your mind works and looking at different things. And it leads me to the question of what was the last thing that you did for fun that was new and new experiences and whatnot. So I would like to know what was the last thing that you did that was new that you've never tried before?
Yeah, I think the most recent is I started trying to teach myself how to play bass. I'm a pianist. I used to be a singer. I played drums, and I've always wanted to play a stringed instrument. It's not a natural thing for me. And so what that requires me to do is be very focused in on the moment, which is a pretty good thing for the kind of mental approach to things. I think I'm pretty good at what I do. So having something that I'm really bad at is great for maintaining humility, which I think is also a very, very helpful skill to develop.
Uh,
I have three daughters. They help me with that skill as well. And ultimately, I'd love to get on stage and play with some folks in a way that tests whether I'm just learning for fun or whether I'm learning to be relatively proficient at it. Again, that comes back to, I've defined my outcome. My outcome is I want to be on stage performing with people.
wow.
Not I just want to learn. That's an activity. I can do that without ever getting any good, right?
Uh, That is awesome. I love that thought process. I mean, lots of people say, "Oh, I'm just learning. I just want to learn." I'm like, but you're like, "No, I want to perform. I want to be on stage."
Yeah.
Um, when you're going to organizations and you're telling them to, okay, implement this, implement that, try this, how much of a timeline do you usually give things to see results? Is it usually very, very quick, or do you go, no, we have to give it some more time, then things will start to come around?
Yeah, I think it's so context specific. I don't know if there's a good answer to that. But where I start first with almost everybody is defining the clarity of outcomes.
Hmm.
And then I want to measure that repeatedly. Because if I don't know what I'm solving for, it doesn't matter how fast I get there. And that clarity is what, especially for entrepreneurs, especially as you're starting to build up your teams and you're thinking about scaling up. Like in your head, you know exactly what good looks like.
Right.
The moment you bring in another person, and then heaven forbid, you end up having some success and you have a couple, two or three layers in the organization. Like your ability to define those outcomes for people will be absolutely critical in your ability to scale yourself.
Mhm.
And so timing really depends on the context, how hard it is, who's
Yeah.
involved, what skills are required, et cetera. You don't necessarily control that. What you do control is, does everyone know what winning looks like? And I think in almost any company, whether you have three people or if you have 3,000 people, we can do a much better job at that.
How about for you personally? Like when it comes to things that aren't going your way, but you do have a plan in place and you do have a vision and it's clear, how quick do you pivot or change direction to get to where you want to go?
Yeah, I'd love to say really quickly that that answer isn't always true. Let me tell you a personal story if I can lean into some vulnerability here. So about 3 years ago, I walked into a doctor's office and they'd been treating me for a yeah, something weird that was in the eye, and next thing you know, it's doubled in size. And they said, okay, it's the dreaded C word, and you're gonna this is scary. There are a couple different variations, but the most likely variation was 5 year survival rate in single digits. Okay. So, welcome to reality. All the stuff you thought mattered doesn't matter anymore. So, what do you do in a situation like that? I did three things. The first thing I tried to do is I was very focused in on what I could control. I cannot control whether it has already metastasized. I am in control whether I get the tumor out. And so I became lightning focused in on those things that I could control. I could also control where I spent my time learning. Because once you look at data and you say, ooh, this is bad, you don't need to look at the same data over and over and over. So when I found myself wanting to doom scroll and probably feel sorry for myself, I didn't look up survival rates. I looked up innovations in liver cancer and brain cancer, those areas where that metastasized cancer was likely to go if it went. I also became very focused in on what I can control around the types of treatment that I got. So I went and I found people who were open to and got involved in some experimental liquid biopsies that give you a little bit more advanced notice before something were to show up on scans. And then importantly, I tried to step forward with a belief around gratitude. Like, what? I have three daughters. What a wonderful opportunity to show them how to deal with life when it's unfair. And so you kind of pull all those things together, and it's all about the precision of the mindset. You control what you can control. You give up to higher power those things that you don't. You get really focused on where you're dedicating your time, and you get ruthless in your pursuit of joy. Like, I think those lessons apply to just about any time we find ourselves in any kind of toe stub in our lives, not just in once. And oh, by the way, in case people are, I'm still here. In the words of Monty Python, I'm not dead yet. I think we're licking this thing, which is also, I think time will tell, but the outcome appears to be pretty good from my
Well,
vantage point today.
whatever you're doing and whatever mindset you have, it's working. So thank you very much for sharing that story. Sometimes it's hard to share something personal, but much appreciated because that type of story really translates very well to like motivation, inspiration, and all that kind of stuff. So thank you very much for that. Now, what I know you work with a lot of different companies and clients. What is the ideal client? What is the situation that the companies are in that comes to you that get the most success?
Yeah, it's usually where you have a business that recognizes that execution is dragging, people are probably involved, and we don't know why. And in those environments, it is again, I'm an engineer. I have a finance background. I've dabbled in this human capital thing for the last 30-ish years. You pull those things together and you can fairly rapidly assess, you know, I can look at a business strategy through a talent lens and say, here's what I think is going to happen. Here's why I think it's going to happen. And here's what we do about it. And companies that are struggling through just base performance expectations, W. Edwards Deming would say, again, 94% of the time, a people problem is not a people problem. It's a systems architecture problem. And very few folks out there in the market, I think, are candidly as good as I am at looking at the business through its a talent lens and being able to do that, level of diagnosis. The other is if you're a CEO and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I scale fast enough? I can't afford someone like Jackson or others like me. Yeah, let's talk anyway because you may not be able to get all of me, but you might be able to get a part of me, and you can certainly get frameworks, and we can help work through those too.
Well, another way that people get a part of you is through your podcast. Share with us the path towards creating that podcast and more about why people should listen to it.
Yeah, it's actually funny. So I shared at the very beginning. I think I did. I grew up not as an HR guy. I was a radio disc jockey and Country 930 KBFW, Bellingham's best country music, and that was an absolute hoot. So I ended up showing up as a guest on a podcast about 18 months ago, and my friend Joe said, "Hey, that was really good. You should do a podcast." So yeah, so okay, we'll go do that. And we've put out, I think, 140 episodes now. It is all about how to rethink how human capital really works. And the idea behind it is we've got to figure out a way to elevate and align human capital because now is the moment, and this is where we just need to recognize things don't work the way we want them to work. And most HR has not kept up with where we're headed. What do I mean by that? Performance reviews that are done every year, assuming that nothing changes inside that year, and the goals stay static throughout that year, and the people don't like. That's not the world I live in. It's not the, especially as an entrepreneur, that's not the world that you're living in. So we try to help people get really simple, really pragmatic, and take incremental steps that align better with business outcomes. And we've had some pretty good success on it. It's been a lot of fun. We're in like 90 plus countries, and I found out earlier this week we were number one in Norway, which is I've never been there, but I think it's kind of cool.
No,
Um,
that's awesome.
yeah, and you can find us. It's the Talent Sherpa podcast. You can find it wherever you get your shows, and all of my other materials are available at mytalentsherpa.com. And just click through the links, and would love to spend time with anyone that might need some help. I'm here for you.
Awesome. Uh, when you were sharing that path, I was thinking also something else with regards to people and technology. Uh, it's funny how the more technology there is, the purpose of it is supposed to connect people with more people and be able to build relationships and whatnot. However, it seems like the more technology there is, people are getting more and more disconnected.
Yeah,
So, what is something that you're doing that kind of brings back what people were doing in the past that has a greater impact now because of technology? For instance, personally, I still write Christmas cards to everybody by hand.
that's nice.
And because of that, it's people remember us for who we are and they connect, they send something back because not many people send Christmas cards anymore. So what is something that you're doing that still has that human connection?
Yeah, I wish I was doing that. I should start doing it. I think that's a really good idea. Uh, we leverage in my practice, we leverage technology to bring in CHROs who are largely in the same space of their career, which is
Mhm.
SMB, low infrastructure. And we certainly share a lot of frameworks and here's the way things should be working that no one ever tells you. And we talk about the mandate and we talk about altitude and we talk about an identity crisis. But most importantly, we build a cohort that can connect and that can reach out and help each other. One of the things I figured out again in my first professional toast stop, I was one of the first members of my PepsiCo class that got a top public company CHRO job, which was awesome. Until I figured out that over half that job is something you're completely unprepared for. And I had a wonderful set of network contacts within people who still worked at PepsiCo, none of whom could help me on this. And so I will spend every week at least 30 minutes talking with somebody I don't know and figuring out how I can be helpful to them. Make love connections with people that they need to be a part of, uh, and and create these communities where people can come together in a psychologically safe way, which by the way is not comfortable. Psychological safety is putting an uncomfortable truth on the table and and still feeling like you belong to the ecosystem that you're a part of. And creating those moments where we can help people with that. Because you're absolutely right. Everything that technology is designed for connection is actually leading the opposite direction. And you know, I wish I knew my neighbors better than I do, but I remember it. I'm old enough to remember a time where you actually you had neighbors that were paying attention to what was happening in your life, and you would have shared meals and cul-de-sac barbecues if you had that as an opportunity. And I think we're missing that, especially as we get into this this season that we find ourselves in.
Right. Cul-de-sac barbecues, that brings back memories. Like I used to grow up in a cul-de-sac, and we every year everybody comes
Yeah.
out. And what's funny also is because when you mentioned you wish you knew your neighbors a little bit more. I know somebody who's lived in a condo for like 10 years, and then one day somebody opened the door for them at the bottom, and then they go, "Do we know you?" And she's like, "Yeah, I've been your neighbor for like 10 years." But anyway,
Look, I remember back when all the dogs in the neighborhood knew each other.
yeah,
Like that's, I'm not one of those get off my lawn Clint Eastwood guys. But that was actually that was a better time.
right,
And today, I think we've lost the obligation to persuade. If
right,
you and I have a disagreement, I'm more likely to think you're evil than you're wrong.
yeah.
And I think most people are well intentioned. They may have bad data sources, or they may not have ever confronted the strength of their own arguments. And if we really want to create that connective tissue, like having provocative, well-intentioned, psychologically safe challenges, it's where we need to go.
Very, very well said. I was going to say, hey, do you have one more message to give to everybody? I think that was already it. Thank you very much for that. But before I let you go, I got five quick rapid fire questions for you. Give me the first thing that comes to mind. All right. You're stranded on a deserted island, one food to eat for the rest of your life, no consequence. You'll still be happy and fit and healthy. What would it be?
Oh heavens, I am probably having gluten-free donuts from this really nice place in Stockholm or
Ah,
in Helsinki, Finland.
wow. Very, very specific. Great choice.
Yeah,
Choice.
donuts and cinnamon rolls. I mean, if you're celiac, you can't find good stuff every place. If otherwise, I would tell you some of the kebabs from Turkey are
Ah,
amazing.
wow. I know you're a person that loves to be on stage, so therefore I'm going to ask you your dream guest or dream partner to perform on stage with. Who would that be?
Oh, I've done some cool stuff, but I think oh shoot, yeah, I think being up there with Tim McGraw would be pretty kick ass.
Nice. So Tim McGraw shows up at your door. Hey, buddy, let's work together. Let's go on stage sometime. Let's get to know each other. What does that night look like to you? You guys are gonna hang out and get to know each other. You got it all planned out. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, I think we're probably sitting on the back porch and we're having conversations about paths and journeys and priorities and probably faith and not Faith the thing, not the wife. He's married to Faith Hill. Um, Although we probably talk about that too. Uh, and I think that you know honestly as you step back, one of the challenges that we have in this world today is we first look to the differences in people, and the reality is so much of us are built on the same stuff. And if you focus first on what drives similarities, then you can see the differences as what they are, minor, and that diversity provides a lot of wonderful color to the experience. And you can't just say, okay, you're different than what I am. Like you and I grew up in different worlds, but we both shared barbecue in the cul-de-sac. Like
Exactly.
build from that. So I think I would try to figure out ways to build from there.
In alternate universe, you are a professional wrestler, and you need to pick what was that theme music you're walking out to?
Oh, clearly it's Kashmir by Led Zeppelin.
Choice. And then lastly, give me a number from 1 to 5.
I'm going to go with three.
1, 2, 3. So word is stamps. So stamps on an envelope, which I'm pretty sure nobody buys anymore. But anyway, stamps. How is success like stamps if you're using stamps as a metaphor for success?
Yeah, I think you need to find the way to be successful by taking what you do and imprinting it on something else that is in motion.
Nicely done. So that's how success is like stamps. Thank you very much for your time. Also, your stories, your successes, your failures, all that stuff. Great lessons for everybody to learn from. Any final words from you, and what's the best way to reach out?
Just let's be good to each other out there. There's a lot of nonsense in the world, and ultimately, if we can start on clarity of outcome, everything else gets so much better. And if you want to follow my work, mytalentsherpa.com, you have access there to everything, and have search out the Talent Sherpa podcast wherever you get your shows, and I write a best-selling Substack as well on a weekly basis. You can find that at talentsherpa.substack.com. Just really appreciate you inviting me on.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much again for everybody. Make sure you reach out to Jackson, and you never know, he might be on stage with Tim McGraw sometime. So, once again, thank you. He's Jackson. I'm Fong. Until next time, today is the day to lock your peak potential. We'll see you later.